Let's dig right in. So I want to begin as we talk tonight, this afternoon, about mixed emotions. What is one of the silliest or most ridiculous lines in a movie or a song? A one-liner. Anybody?
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
Hey, that's what I thought of also. You know what movie that's from?
Yeah. What's up, Doc?
No.
No, in What's Up, Doc?
Love
No.
Story.
But What's Up, Doc does a take on
Ben.
it. Never mind.
Right. No, there
From
he
Love
says
Story.
how stupid the line is.
Love
Yes.
Story. Love Story.
Yes.
Love Story, yes. A very funny movie, Love Story.
But I don't think that friends don't have to say sorry is a silly remark.
It is. No, that's why in the next
That's
movie,
the point.
he says that. That was the dumbest line because he was in that movie too, and now he's in this. Okay. There's any other lines? What about don't worry, be happy? Now, it's a nice thought, but psychologist Krista Morgan is a bit more realistic in that she says, don't worry, but don't just be happy. I'll repeat that. Don't worry, but don't just be happy. Do you remember the movie, the animated movie in 2015 named Inside Out?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a children's movie, but we all know that some of these children's movies are really meant for us adults, that we glean from it something even more than the children sometimes. So in case somebody isn't familiar, I'll just give a very, very brief. So she points to this story of an 11-year-old girl named Riley, who unhappily moves cities with her family and experiences extreme difficulty adjusting to her new life. The thrust of the narrative is conflicting emotions, fear, anger, joy, disgust, and sadness, all personified, incredibly done in the film, all personified by characters in her head battling it out. Essentially, the movie is meant to teach kids and adults that we all have emotions inside us, and at times they are in conflict with each other. However, you can find a way, the movie claims, to accept and accommodate all these emotions simultaneously. Remember last week we talked about people running away from one emotion, anxiety, but here the claim is made that we can live with a variety simultaneously, even if they are opposites. And each one has a role in creating one sense of self. Now she goes on, I'll share the screen. Another psychologist comments, okay. Marie Rowland. In psychology, there is a therapeutic process called parts therapy. It is where the client can break down and name the different emotional parts within them rather than be defined by one feeling. And the therapeutic language is recognizable to all of us, lay people. as we use it every day without even thinking about it. There is a part of me that is super excited to be starting over, but there is another part of me that's really scared. The human condition means we hold discordant, even opposing emotions within us. These contradictory feelings can be unhelpful, causing us to get stuck. But in actual fact, this is what it is to be human, and it's part of life. Further, these uncomfortable and disorienting feelings can serve you. When you successfully create emotional delineation, you can enjoy or relish that part that is doing well. And this is a confidence booster, helping us to remain optimistic about life. This propagates creativity and drive, and new possibilities may open up which otherwise would not have been explored. Training your attention on what is good in your life is a critical survival mechanism, which helps to stave off despair or hopelessness. Emotions, again, may be discordant, but they can coexist. I have often said that our sages, Chazal, were wonderful psychologists. This goes for the Bible, the Tanakh, as well. And let's look at text number 2 from Breshit. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. We're familiar with this scene. When he saw that he could not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip became dislocated as he wrestled with him. And he, the angel, said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he, Jacob, said, "I will not let you go unless you have blessed me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Yisrael." Why Israel? Because Yisrael means to wrestle with God. Because you have commanding power with an angel of God and with men, ve'im anashim vatuchal, and you have prevailed. Now, in Hebrew, vatuchal means more exactly than prevailed is that you were able to. Now, Tanakh scholar here in Jerusalem, Shmuel Klitzner, wants to understand why it says you prevailed and did not say you triumphed. And this is what Klitzner says. Bruno Bedelheim has observed that many mistakenly view psychoanalysis as having the purpose of making life easy or of achieving some kind of victory over the contentious forces within us. But this is not what its founder intended. Psychoanalysis was created to enable sheyuchal, man, to accept the problematic nature of life without being defeated by it or giving in to escapism, which we said last week some do, even with one emotion. Freud's prescription is that only by struggling against what seem like overwhelming odds can man succeed in wringing meaning out of existence. We enhance or we embrace this notion of mixed feelings in our celebrations and our commemorations throughout the year. Can you tell me which holidays have almost opposing elements?
Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
What are the opposing?
The future, the next year.
So the next year, as opposed to what we do on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
Well, you sort of celebrate Rosh Hashanah, everybody's together and you're happy to see everybody, but then you also think about the future, the coming year, and what's in store.
Okay, Yefeh, Frida. Anybody else?
I think of Sukkot.
Okay, what about Sukkot?
You have to be in the sukkah no matter what the weather is. So that's a negative.
No.
But on the other hand, it's not only celebrating what we did, but it's really a wonderful time for family getting together and the joy of decorating the sukkah. To me, like a trip is the planning for the trip. The sukkah is planning for decoration of the sukkah. We used to take 3 weeks of making all kind of things for the sukkah. So I see the
Yeah, absolutely. And Sukkot is the holiday that we are told, V'samachta b'chagecha, but it also, as opposed to the serious message of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes that we read, that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, and also living in the Sukkah, that sense of temporariness. So any other holiday?
Well, we actually have built into our holidays where we're rejoicing, we build in Yizkor, which is a time when we're remembering, looking back, and it becomes bittersweet in our celebration of the Chagim.
Yefeh, absolutely, absolutely. That can bring to mind also at a wedding, how we break the glass for a moment of remembering the Churban. Absolutely. And perhaps Purim, that it's a very serious holiday if you think about what was about to happen, and yet how frivolous we become. Costumes, the Mishloach Manot, the Purim spiels. Okay, so we...
The Seder plate, because we have the egg at the Seder plate. That's a tradition that we don't know where it started, but whenever we mourn, we have hard-boiled eggs, like you come from a funeral. And at the Seder, we remember the destruction of the Mikdash.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're talking about Pesach, that we have the sense of being grateful that we triumphed, but we also indicate that we're not happy that our enemies died, and therefore some of us take a dip of the wine, which symbolizes joy, and takes it out of the full cup of joy. Okay, now look at text 4. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with quaking, trembling. Gilu birada from Tehillim. And this pasuk is meant to depict Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it is described as a day of tension between two contradictory emotions, awe and joy. And as you just pointed out, Frida, on the one hand, Yom Hadin, the day of judgment, and Yom HaZikaron, another name of Rosh Hashanah, day of remembrance. So that is rather sober, that God will be remembering, we will be remembering what we have done in the past. Will that impact on the future? And in our liturgy, there are some very explicit words saying, will I live or will I leave this world by fire? Da, 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 da. And then, of course, we have the sweetness of the honey and the abundance of the pomegranate, and the new fruit represents looking at the new future. So I wrote before the Psukim with Yaakov, Psychology, Tanakh Psychology 101, that this idea of mixed emotions and living with mixed emotions is brought home to us even in this ancient text by the commentators in saying that don't think you're going to go through life easily, but it's always going to be that ma'avak, that struggle, and with the mixed feelings as represented in that world. You struggle, but you're never going to triumph so that it's all done. It's going to repeat and repeat, perhaps a different struggle, but that's our lot. Now, our day, this is just another quote. You know that we don't say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, even though it's a Chag, a Yom Tov. And it's almost as if, because we're praising God, that this conversation here between the angels, why is it that Israel does not recite Hallel on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? God replied, when the king sits in judgment, if you're in a courtroom and you're making a case before a judge, if you start singing to him words of praise, he's going to think you're sucking up to him, and it's not appropriate. And it doesn't make sense because you're in a very serious mood. So again, the seriousness of the Yamim Noraim, as represented by the names and the liturgy, but also, yes, gathering together, eating these foods, wearing new clothes, the greetings that we say to each other. Now, it isn't just in our holidays that we can see this notion of mixed emotions has existed, but in our day-to-day lives, we are presented with complex situations.
Bracha, very often our attitude determines, like more than once in life, I had to move from one place to the other. It was a mixed emotion, and I decided I could either living behind the known or look at the future as an adventure. So we do have a choice.
You have a choice, but that doesn't mean to say that you didn't have elements of sadness by leaving, but the healthy thing is to be able to find things that you're looking forward to. So I want to look at a couple of life situations that deal with this issue.
They should come out and see what have we
Mixed
done.
emotions. Stephen, please mute yourself. Okay, so listen carefully. Imagine that you see someone you deeply dislike. Why? Because you've seen him bullying younger, smaller, defenseless children. And you see him now being bullied himself. How do you think you're going to feel seeing this one who you've seen bully now being bullied by others? How do you think you'll feel? Think about it.
I think it's mixed emotions.
And what are those?
Well, you sort of feel he's getting what he deserves, what he used to give to others. But
Okay.
At the same time, you feel badly for him that he's being bullied. I feel badly for anybody who's being bullied, whether I
Even
like
if
it or
they
not.
had bullied?
Yeah.
Is it feeling badly for him? Well, these days you're given so much information that somebody who is a bully, we really do have to pity him. because it's not even somebody who's necessarily this giant. It can be a small little thing, but who's got issues and is doing. So I understand that you would feel sorry for him, but together with being gratified because he's getting what he deserves, is there another reason that you might be upset by the fact that he's being bullied and has nothing to do with him? What else?
I think I would be also angry at the people that were doing the bullying. It's like you have this circle or this cycle, they talk about things that are systemic and how one generation visits on the next. So the first one bullies the second one and the second one bullies the third one.
Okay, but I think this situation tends to want to give a feeling that you deeply dislike, because you must have seen it happening so much that, yeah, you might feel pity. Your heart goes out to somebody who's suffering, and if it's a kid especially. But what else could make you not completely siding with or being happy about him being bullied? It's that you have strong feelings against the whole notion of bullying. Do you see how that's slightly different from saying you feel sorry for that kid? But what's making you not totally happy because he's getting his is that you're upset by the fact, yeah, that the bullying is going on, even if he deserves it. But what's really getting you is your sense and need for justice and fair play. Okay? So again, not too many of us would just watch that kind of scene and be happy. You're right. You'd feel some rachmanis. You'd hope that it could be taken care of for both parties. Because as I said, if you're bullying, something's got to be wrong. But one of the reasons you're not totally happy is you want people to be treated properly. And that's what's bothering you, not necessarily that person. Just as in the Haggadah, there is some, I don't know if you have one, that when it gets to the point where we say before Eliyahu, Shfoch hamatcha, pour out your wrath on the enemies. Do any of you have a Haggadah that either has deleted that paragraph or has kept it in, but places next to it, Ushfoch ahavatcha, pour out your love of the enemy? Opposing, but somehow wanting to hopefully live with both, say you would prefer that there would be total justice and you don't have to say shfoch hamatcha. On the other hand, if it's necessary, it's necessary. Okay, now let's look at another case. I would hope that none of you are familiar with such an episode, but I'm sure you won't be shocked. And this is from another psychologist, Leon Seltzer. And he says, imagine that you've just learned that your alcoholic, abusive, and even despised father has just passed away. You've been alienated from him for many years. The final straw being his borrowing your credit card when he temporarily stayed with you as an adult and unauthorized running up a debt that took you many months to pay off. So hearing the news of his demise leads you to experience considerable satisfaction and relief, knowing that this cold, manipulative, deceiving sociopath of a father is now out of your life for good. But do you think that's where it's going to end? Are those going to be the only feelings that a person, Frida, you're already shaking your head. What else?
You also remember good times. You remember good times that you had with him when he wasn't like that.
To me, it's a lack of chance to make things okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. He goes on to say, yet, to your surprise, you discover that along with your positive feelings of final emancipation from him, you're also afflicted with enormous, almost overwhelming feelings of grief. And these unexpectedly powerful and totally unwilled emotions really have nothing to do with his passing, but with the irrevocable death of deeply buried hopes and dreams. I think similar to what Esther just said, now unexpectedly resurfacing that you harbored since childhood for a secure, loving bond with him. You recognize that your unanticipated, almost inconsolable feelings intimately connect to the never received approval and acceptance you'd craved from him, but had to deny because otherwise its absence would have been too painful to bear. Once again, the tension between seemingly incompatible yet coexistent emotions can be understood on the basis of mixed feelings that, given the psychological dynamic giving rise to them, are totally logical. Do we understand this? Do we relate to it? Does it make sense?
Bracha, I have a friend who underwent this same thing about 2 years ago, exactly the same thing. And she didn't understand, the grief that came after the relief. This explains it very well.
If you want the full article, let me know, and I can get it to you.
Okay.
Okay, life is not meant to be simple, but it's going to be a matter of knowing how to accept and to accommodate. Now, I want to go back to our Tanakh and Yaakov in a different episode. Another example of mixed feelings. So just before Yaakov and Esav are going to reunite after their split of 20 years, we remember that Yaakov left not under pleasant circumstances, and now they are about to meet. So you can imagine that you could have very mixed feelings. Not mixed enough or strong enough on one hand to keep you from reuniting or meeting, but mixed. So Yaakov had sent messengers to Esav, and it's translated here as angels. The word malach, mem lamed aleph chaf, is an angel of God, it is also a human messenger. Some will take it either way. So the angels returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is also coming toward you, and 400 men are with him." Jacob became very frightened and was distressed. So he divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the cattle and the camels into 2 camps. Now we all know that the Torah does not use one word extra. If it can say something with 2 words, it will say it with 2 words, not 3. 1 word, not 2. So question is, which 2 words are mentioned here? And you might be fine without one of them.
Frightened and distressed.
Right. Okay. So in this midrash, Rabbi Judah Bar Ilai said, "Are not fear and distress identical? The meaning, however, is that he was afraid that he might be killed. He was distressed that he might kill." That reminds us of Golda Meir's line. For Jacob thought, "If he prevails against me, will he not kill me? While if I prevail against him, will I not kill him?" That is the meaning of he was afraid lest he should be killed and distressed lest he should kill. And Rabbi Shabtai Bass of the 17th century, who wrote a commentary on Rashi's commentary, elaborates on this. One might argue that Jacob should surely not be distressed about the possibility of killing Esau. Why? For there is an explicit rule. If someone comes to kill you, forestall it by killing him, self-defense. So why did he have to have qualms about it if he might kill him? Nonetheless, Jacob did have qualms, fearing that in the course of the fight, he might kill some of Esau's men who were not themselves intent on killing Jacob, but merely on fighting Jacob's men. And even though Esau's men were pursuing Jacob's men, and every person has the right to save the life of the pursued at the cost of the life of the pursuer, nonetheless, there is a condition. If the pursued could have been saved by maiming a limb of the pursuer, but instead the rescuer killed the pursuer, the rescuer is liable to capital punishment on that account. Hence, Jacob feared that in the confusion of battle, he might kill some of Esau's men when he might have restrained them by merely inflicting injury on them. Now, the commentator goes on to say that part of Jacob's greatness here, and we might not be thrilled with things earlier on, even though it had a greater purpose, but part of his greatness here was his capability of having this moral anxiety, even at the prospect of his own death. So feeling on the one hand, fear, but also anticipating I might have to do something that would hurt somebody else. Perceiving Yaakov's lack of self-concern, self-centeredness, missing, brings to mind a very specific episode in the Nachshon Waxman tragic narrative. I don't know if you'll recall this tragedy in Israel. Nachshon was one of Esther and Yehuda Waxman's 7 sons. 3 of the sons were in Tzahal, in the army, concurrently. When in 1994, 19-year-old Nachshon, who had been in the army for just a year, was abducted and killed by Hamas. He was held hostage for 6 days. Family knew nothing of what was going on. They knew something was wrong because he had been on a leave and he was supposed to come back on Sunday. He never came back, but they weren't being given information. On the 6th day, he was executed as a military rescue operation made an attempt but failed. The Israeli soldiers showed up, and right in front of them, they executed Nachshon. Esther's both parents and the entire family, and whole community, of course, raised their voices, and to the world. Perhaps you heard Esther even traveled to Toronto. Well, Esther had a direct conversation with Yitzhak Rabin, prime minister at the time, but it was not productive. Israel would not release the 200 terrorists as demanded. Now, move ahead 12 years, June 2006. Who is captured then? Gilad Shalit by Hamas, and he is held hostage for 5 years. He was released on October 18, 2011, as part of a prisoner exchange, 1,027 Palestinian prisoners. And this was done under Netanyahu. Now, what's the episode I referred to a few moments ago? And it's connected with mixed feelings. As the possibility of releasing these Palestinian prisoners was being discussed, people publicly, because Esther and Yehuda came to all kinds of rallies and showed support for the Shalits, people publicly approached Esther, who was the more vocal of the 2 parents, asking her how she felt about the exchange. Even though the exchange was to include the driver of the car that abducted her son, Nachshon. And despite her other sons saying that these released prisoners might very well kill one of her grandchildren in the future. So how did Esther respond? A grieving Esther who claims she sings, she laughs, thank God she takes care of more than 15 grandchildren, but every day thinks of Nachshon. How did she respond? I need this boy Gilad to get home to his mother. I need this boy Gilad to get home to his mother. Talk about mixed emotions. One further note. Rabin, Zichrono Livracha, arrived at the Waxman's home the Saturday night before they were about to bury Nachshon. And Esther describes the scene. Rabin said, I accept all responsibility. Not that he felt that they should have given the prisoners, but they could have done more with soldiers. My husband Yehuda requested from Rabin to talk to him privately. And I knew what he was going to say to him. You are responsible. You did not prepare the rescue operation well. You didn't give it enough time. She said she watched Rabin leave the room sobbing. And Leah Rabin, his wife, told Esther that there was only one other time that Rabin sobbed, and that was when he lost his closest friend in the Six-Day War. Now, from the time of the murder, Esther says, Rabin called us every Erev Shabbat without fail and every Erev Yom Tov. And now listen, this man who did not come through, she says, we had a very close relationship with him. Interestingly, we're talking about Rabin. I remembered that he was given shortly after the Six-Day War an honorary doctorate from Hebrew University. And in his remarks accepting the honor, he said the following, again, pointing to our subject. He says, we find more and more a strange phenomenon among our fighters. Their joy is incomplete, and more than a small portion of sorrow and shock prevails in their festivities. And there are those who abstain from celebration. The warriors in the front line saw with their own eyes not only the glory of victory, but the price of victory. Their comrades who fell beside them bleeding. And I know that even the terrible price which our enemies paid touched the hearts of many of our men. It may be that the Jewish people has never learned or accustomed itself to feel the triumph of conquest and victory, and therefore we receive it with mixed feelings.
Nicely done.
Let's turn to an entirely different episode taken from the Talmud and one of its depictions of mixed emotions. Just one brief word of background. We're going to meet here an Elisha ben Abuya. Some of you might be familiar with him if you've read the beautiful book As a Driven Leaf. He was a scholar and then left the world of the sages, the world of tradition. The Chachamim attribute his sudden running away from tradition based on the fact that he one day saw a young boy who had climbed a tree to shoo away the mother bird so that he could then, as Torah law instructs, could take the eggs. And what happens to that boy as he's doing this mitzvah, which says you will receive long life for it, he falls and dies. So he becomes Elisha a heretic, okay? Rabbi Meir was preaching in the study house in Tiberias. His teacher, Elisha, rode past on his horse on the Sabbath. They came and said to Rabbi Meir, "Your rabbi is outside." He stopped and went out to him. He, Elisha, said to him, "What were you teaching today?" He, Rabbi Meir, said to him, "And the Lord blessed the latter years of Job's life more than the former." He said to him, "And with what verse did you introduce your teaching?" He said to him, "And the Lord gave Job twice what he had before," meaning that he doubled his wealth. And then suddenly, Elisha says to Meir, "Enough, Meir. We have come to the boundary beyond which it is forbidden to travel on the Shabbat." Okay, you have to picture. It's Shabbat. In a very un-Shabbat-like manner, Elisha is on the horse, and he suddenly stops and points out to his student, "We can't go any further. You're not allowed to go any further. There are only a certain amount of steps you can take on Shabbat." He, surprised, Rabbi Meir, says to him, "How do you know that?" He, Elisha, said to him, "From the steps of my horse, which I count as it trotted for a visit of 2,000 cubits. He said to him, "You have all this knowledge in you, yet you still do not want to repent from your heresy?" He said to him, "I cannot." And he said to him, "But why?" He said to him, "Because once I was passing by the Holy of Holies on my horse on Yom Kippur, which fell on the Sabbath, and I heard a still small voice coming out of the Holy of Holies and saying, 'Return, my wayward sons, except for Elisha ben Abuya, who recognized my power and turned against me.'" Now, before we discuss this, you'll see that I have a J before the name of the Masechet, the tract, because this is taken, this version, from the Jerusalem Talmud. And I put next to Elisha ben Abuya a star, an asterisk, because in the Babylonian Talmud, at that point, it puts Acher, what Elisha came to be known as. What does Acher mean?
After.
No, not Achar, Acher.
Other.
Another.
The
Other. Different from the community. And the people of the Babylonian claim that that has got to be the better interpretation, because why would God ever stop somebody from repenting? So that when he says, "I want everybody, including Elisha ben Abuya, but I don't want him if he's going to come as the heretic, the Acher." Now, first of all, what do you see the relationship to be between the teacher and the student, Elisha and Meir?
Meir loved him dearly. He was
Okay.
very devoted to him.
Okay, Meir loved him dearly.
Was
And in
mutual.
fact, it's mutual, okay? Because we could focus on just Elisha having mixed emotions, but we shouldn't forget that Meir had to also. First of all, he leaves. His students could be talking, how does he show respect to this heretic? Okay? But it is mutual. Now, what are some elements in this story that show us Elisha's ambivalence to tradition? Some very concrete.
When he talks about the Eruv.
Exactly. He's the heretic, but he has it on his mind to remind Meir. You know, somebody else would not care, would think it's a joke, but he still knows it, as Meir said, and he points it out to Meir. What else? He's on his horse. He could have gone anywhere. But where does he come repeatedly? Shabbat, Yom Kippur, on the horse, but to the Beit Knesset. Something is drawing him, even if it's on that horse, to come to the place of holiness. He perhaps is drawn still, even when he's engaged in heresy. And he's in fact shuttling back between two worlds. And so I think Meir is very well aware of that. And that's why he never gives up on it. There's something that he's holding on to.
Yeah,
And maybe when somebody is like that, you're not meant to give up on them because you never know what would be. And on top of that, so let's say he remains a heretic. Does that mean that Meir can't have mixed feelings also of being disappointed, upset that a fellow Jew is a heretic? On the other hand, he has such affection for him and realizes that he is wise. And so with those mixed feelings on both parties, you don't separate entirely.
Reminds me of a man I know who never kept kosher or Shabbat or any connection to Judaism, but asked to be buried in a Jewish cemetery.
Yeah, and there are different reasons why people at that stage in life make requests like that. Any other comments? Are there any other characters that you're familiar with that you think the Bible or the Talmud introduces us to that must have mixed feelings?
I think all of them.
Exactly. Including God. Including God.
And I'm sure that sometimes you do something because you know it's the right thing, but it may have mixed feelings, because I think of Rebecca when she tells Jacob to take the blessing. As a mother, she has two sons. She must have had mixed feelings.
Absolutely. But that's right. But in her role as mother of a nation, she made that choice. Yeah.
But it would have been very difficult.
Of course. Very, very difficult. Anybody else?
Abraham, when he sent Ishmael away, the same thing.
Yes. Okay. I'd like to conclude with a personal anecdote. When we lived in Albany, New York, there was an educational director named Shraga Arian. And in fact, in the early years of Beth Tikvah, he came up once to give a talk, whether it was about the Hebrew school or whatever, I'm not sure, I don't remember. He died young, but he created a magnificent educational institution, and even more important than that, a camp, which was called Camp Diva. Now, why do I end with him? Because I think it brings home this importance of allowing ourselves to recognize who we are and that we have mixed emotions and maybe even mixed dreams, and we can find a way to live with them, coexist with them. And so he begins in this book, and he titles it, I Chose Jewish Education. At various stages in my youthful dreaming, I wanted to be a writer, a kibbutz farmer, an actor, and a community leader. Two contrasting moods played within me. I yearned to serve mankind in the name of a great ideal, but I also dreamed of hearing the sound of my name reverently repeated by masses of people, and my performances having stand-up ovations. What he did, and in the end, he concludes how lucky he was because he used his drama and his ability to act in building every part of the school's curricula. And at the end of the book, he says how grateful that he was able to take a seemingly self-centered, where he's looking for applause and masses, and he was able to use that in the direction of a holy cause. And so that when we confront mixed feelings or conflicting that might take us in different directions, we have to look at them as being malleable, that we can somehow work with them and hope that we can succeed like this Shraga Aryan. And the book is called He Kindled a Light. So, and starting tonight, onward tomorrow, there isn't going to be a day, sometimes, hopefully in a lesser degree, that we're not going to experience this mixed emotion. Okay, this was good for me. I did a lot less coughing, right? Yes. Okay, but I am sweating even though the air conditioning is on from the hot tea. I want to draw your attention to, you will see in the shul website, the next series, a 3-part series. I took Stan Solomon's suggestion very seriously, and it will be about technology and halacha and Israel and modernity and innovation. So we look forward to beginning that, and Daniel tells me you can register on the website.